On the evening of the 4th of December, 1986, in the heart of Bogotá's upscale Chapinero district, an ordinary Thursday night at the elegant Italian restaurant Pozzetto turned into one of the darkest chapters in Colombian history. At first glance, everything seemed normal. Families gathered over plates of pasta, couples sharing wine, waiters weaving through candlelit tables. But sitting quietly in the corner was a 52-year-old man named Campo Elias Delgado, a former Vietnam War veteran and English teacher, calmly finishing his spaghetti bolognese, sipping vodka tonics, even writing a poem for his waiter and leaving a generous tip. No one around him could have imagined that this composed, soft-spoken man had already spent the day soaked in blood, that earlier that morning, he'd murdered his 15-year-old student and her mother, then returned to his own apartment to stab his elderly mother in the back of the neck, wrap her body in newspaper, douse it in gasoline, and set it ablaze before luring neighbors out with a fire alarm and gunning them down as they fled. By the time Delgado walked into Pozzetto, he'd already claimed 9 lives, but his nightmare was far from over. After nearly 2 hours of eating and drinking, he suddenly pulled out a .32 caliber revolver and began methodically shooting diners and staff in the head one by one, cornering them like prey, showing no emotion, no hesitation, just cold, calculated slaughter. Panic erupted. People dove under tables, scrambled for exits, screamed for help. But Delgado moved with terrifying precision, reloading, advancing, firing again and again until 20 more lay dead inside the restaurant alone. In less than 9 hours, across 3 different locations, this lone gunman had taken the lives of 29 innocent people and wounded 11 others, making it the deadliest mass shooting by a single attacker in Colombia's history, a horrifying event that would haunt the nation for decades. But what drove a man like Campo Elias Delgado to commit such unspeakable atrocities? Those who knew him described him as intelligent, well-traveled, even gentle a man who taught English, studied literature, and spoke multiple languages. Yet beneath that polished exterior lay a fractured psyche, shaped by years of psychological trauma, isolation, and a deep-seated resentment toward his overbearing mother, who reportedly controlled every aspect of his life well into his 50s. Some psychologists believe Delgado suffered from severe depression, possibly paranoid schizophrenia, and that his actions were the result of a psychotic break, a final, violent rebellion against a life he felt trapped in. Others point to his time in the United States, where he studied and lived for years, suggesting he may have been exposed to violence and alienation that slowly eroded his mental stability. Whatever the cause, one thing is clear: Delgado didn't just snap, he planned. He wrote letters. He left behind a manifesto of sorts, filled with cryptic reflections on life, death, and his own despair. He even told his student's mother, just hours before killing her, that he was going to do something important that day. And then came the final moments. Chaos, gunfire, the smell of blood mixing with the scent of Italian food still lingering in the air. As police surrounded the restaurant, Delgado made his last stand. Some witnesses say he turned the gun on himself, firing a single shot into his own head as officers closed in. Others claim he was shot by police, his body collapsing onto the blood-soaked floor of the restaurant he'd turned into a slaughterhouse. No one knows for sure. What remains is the aftermath: 29 families shattered, a city in shock, and a question that still echoes to this day. How does a man walk into a room full of strangers, eat dinner, write a poem, and then, without warning, become a monster? This is not just a story of violence, it's a descent into the mind of a man who, on the surface, seemed ordinary, but beneath it carried horrors no one could have predicted. So then, let me take you down another dark road in Colombia's history, this time to a monster so evil, so calculated, that even today, his name sends chills down the spine of every Colombian parent. His name was Luis Alfredo Garavito Cubillos, but the world knew him by a far more terrifying title: La Bestia times the Beast. And if you think the Pozzetto Massacre was horrifying, just wait until you hear what this man did. Because between 1992 and 1999, Garavito didn't just kill a handful of people, he children over and over and over again. Born on the 25th of January 1957 in the small town of Genova in the Quindío region of Colombia, Garavito's early life was anything but normal. He was the oldest of 7 brothers, and from a young age, he was subjected to brutal abuse, both physical and emotional, at the hands of his own father, a violent alcoholic who reportedly beat his wife and children without mercy. Some psychologists believe this trauma planted the seeds of darkness that would later bloom into one of the most horrific crime sprees stories in human history. But here's the thing, Garavito didn't just snap one day. No, this was a slow, calculated descent into evil. By the early 1990s, Garavito had become a ghost, drifting from town to town across Colombia, Ecuador, and even Venezuela, leaving behind a trail of bodies so vast, authorities couldn't even keep count. His victims? Mostly boys, poor, vulnerable street kids between the ages of 6 and 16, many of them from families so desperate they couldn't afford to feed their own children. Garavito would approach them with a smile, offering candy, a few pesos, or even a job, sometimes posing as a monk, a homeless man, or a kind stranger just trying to help. And once he had their trust, once he'd lured them away from prying eyes, the nightmare began. He'd bind them, torture them, sexually assault them, and then almost always them to death, their small bodies dumped in shallow graves, rivers, or abandoned lots across the countryside. For years this went on. Bodies kept turning up, dozens, then hundreds, but no one connected the dots. Police in different towns didn't talk to each other. Families were too poor to demand answers. And Garavito, he just kept moving, kept killing, kept disappearing into the shadows like a phantom. Some estimates say he murdered as many as 400 children during this time, though the official count stands at 138 confirmed victims, the number he confessed to in court. But here's where it gets even more disturbing. In 1999, Garavito was finally caught not for murder, but for attempting to rape a 12-year-old boy in the city of Villavicencio. When police ran his fingerprints, they realized they had something far bigger on their hands. During his interrogation, Garavito did something no one expected. He confessed. For 4 hours, he spoke, detailing crime after crime, leading investigators to mass graves, pointing out locations where he dumped bodies, naming towns, describing victims with chilling precision. He begged for forgiveness. He cried. He claimed he was possessed by demons, that he couldn't stop himself, that he was sorry. But apologies don't bring children back to life. In the end, he was sentenced to 1,853 years in prison, the longest sentence ever handed down in Colombian history, though, thanks to legal loopholes, his actual time served was capped at just 30 years. And on the 12th of October, 2023, at the age of 66, Luis Garavito died in a hospital in Valledupar, northern Colombia, from complications related to eye cancer, still behind bars. Still unrepentant in the eyes of many. But here's the question that still haunts Colombia to this day. How does a man get away with murdering hundreds of children for nearly a decade? How does a monster like Garavito walk freely through towns, markets, and bus stations, blending in with ordinary people, while beneath that ordinary exterior lies a darkness so deep, so incomprehensible, that it defies explanation? This isn't just a story about a killer, it's a story about a system that failed.